Broadcasting from Boston, Massachusetts, the Smart Cities podcast is the only podcast dedicated to all things smart cities. The podcast is the creation of ARC Advisory Group's Smart City practice. ARC advises leading companies, municipalities, and governments on technology trends and market dynamics that affect their business and quality of life in their cities. To engage further, please like and share our podcast or reach out directly on Twitter at Smart City Viewpoints or on our website at www.arcweb.com/industries/smart-cities.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Smart City Podcast. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Joe Moye of Beep Technology. Beep has run an autonomous vehicle platform in Lake Nona for quite a few years now. Let's just jump in. And Joe, tell us a little bit about yourself and where has Beep gone since we last visited with them 2 years ago before COVID hit us?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. It's great to be with you. Appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and your listeners. Beep, as you referenced, is a very focused technology company around the use of autonomous multi-passenger electric vehicles that are focused on providing this first mile, last mile form of transportation. So we have partnered with a number of key suppliers of the shuttles, worked very closely with the U.S. Department of Transportation, NHTSA, our state and local officials, to be able to deploy these vehicles in very meaningful use cases on public roads in over 19 routes now that we're servicing across 4 states. So very exciting venture. I'd say what's kind of unique and different about what we do is our business thesis is really built around the belief that autonomous technologies, the use of autonomous vehicles in particular, are going to be borne out in, these more controlled speed, geo-fenced type use cases where, again, you're providing this alternative means of transportation, but in an environment that is safe and frankly reflective of where the technology is today and where it's headed. And, I think that's probably the biggest difference between how we provide these mobility services versus a lot of what has probably been read about in the robo-taxi world of any-to-any type mobility services.
Well, thanks, Joe. I think you actually anticipated my first question, which really was, tell me about Beep and your strategy on making this autonomous vision a reality. Maybe you can go a little bit deeper into, how is Beep positioned in the market and what sets your approach different from, say, other entities beyond simple geofencing?
Yeah, I think a couple of things I'd highlight. One is a business, we provide a full end-to-end mobility as a service offering. So we bring to our clients, be they public transit operators, be they private communities or campuses, we bring to the table all of the technology, including the vehicle itself, that enables the use of these shuttles in these mobility use cases. We deliver all the services associated with commissioning the vehicles, mapping and managing the routes, down to the maintenance and support of the platforms themselves, scheduling and all the rider type services that we deploy as part of that. So Beep really kind of brings to the table that full end-to-end soup to nuts type scenario, which makes it easy for our clients to leverage these types of offerings, on a kind of pay as you go type basis.
So would it be an overreach to describe this as, say, autonomous vehicles as a service? Is this a pure subscription model?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the right way to look at it. And that's, I think, one of the things that we felt was going to be important in the adoption of these platforms is, bringing them out into areas where, one, they can be highly successful in ridership and use cases and what we're doing to connect people and goods and services in these areas, but making it an easy as a service license model is exactly what we believe is important.
That's great. So how is Beep helping to prove out the autonomous vehicle business case for autonomous mobility in, both the short term and the longer term?
Yeah, so I'd hit on several factors. I mean, there's four kind of key tenets to what we believe, we're doing as far as impacting these communities we serve. First and foremost is safety. The statistics probably better than I do. 94% of all accidents and fatalities are caused by human error or impairment. As I like to say, these vehicles, one in the right environment, are proven to operate three times faster than a human in identifying an incident to be responded to and ultimately actuating a brake in that simple example. Two is they're never distracted or impaired, and we can't lose sight of the fact that this technology, yes, it's evolving, but its primary goal is to reduce the primary cause of accidents out there on our roadways. The second area I'd emphasize is certainly sustainability. These are all electric platforms that we literally measure how many cars we're taking off the roadway, what is the carbon emissions impact of that, and that's not to be forgotten in especially with all the emphasis and focus on that key area of electrification. Certainly extending mobility, providing alternative means of transportation, or frankly, primary means of transportation for people that need to access the goods and services across these communities and don't have a means of doing that, be they the elderly or the disabled or people that just don't have their own personal transportation. So I'd certainly emphasize those key areas as where we're having a big impact, and frankly, where we're able to measure that impact.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, as you were speaking, I was thinking that it's the benefits of autonomous vehicles are not just the elimination of the distracted driving incident where you're not watching and you might be slow to hit the brake or steer in a correct direction, but from a lot of my past work with lighting systems, many pedestrian accidents do happen, frankly, at dusk and dawn when, frankly, vision is compromised. And the vision, quote unquote, of autonomous vehicles can be far better than the human eye, particularly during dusk and dawn scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely the case. And I take it a step further, Jim, and I know a lot of the work that you do in the connected arena is so important to these new technologies that are going to really advance the visibility. It's one thing to be able to, provide an equivalent level of visibility as a human could see in perfect situations. It's another thing to extend, what these vehicles are able to communicate with in the example of things like cameras in intersections that are looking down a roadway further than the eye can see typically, and calculating and analyzing things like the trajectory and speed of a vehicle, and is that vehicle likely to run a red light? And if so, let's keep our AV stationary until we know that for certain. And so the use of technologies that really take it well beyond what the human can see is where I think these platforms get most exciting.
Great. Joe, let's back up a little bit and let me ask a far more foundational question, particularly for those who don't live this day in and day out. There's foundationally, there's a lot of confusion about what is an autonomous vehicle. What is ADAS? So let's say on regular passenger vehicles, what is, level 1, 2, 3, and particularly 4 and 5 autonomous operations? Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe what you're doing to introduce level 4 and 5 to public agencies?
Yeah, and so I think there is a lot of confusion, but there's also a lot of overlap in, the driver assist technologies compared to the autonomous technologies. One, if you look at the cameras and sensors that we utilize, a lot of those, have come from key areas of driver assist. We see it today in the vehicles that we operate on, whether that's adaptive cruise control or the maintaining the lane type technologies. Those things are very important to use in these autonomous vehicles as well. I would say, I think as we fast forward to these level 4, level 5 type scenarios where, today we have a safety attendant on all these vehicles as part of the work that we do with DOT and NHTSA in the testing of these various use cases. We expect to be able to eliminate those attendants here in the next couple of years as part of the evolution of these forms of mobility. But if you kind of come back to the technology that needs to be available in an autonomous platform versus just a driver assist scenario, you need the technology that can ultimately perceive scenarios like a human would. Somebody's approaching a crosswalk. How do I, in the autonomous world, capture not only that image, but the trajectory of that person and whether I need to stop and pause there? That's very different than knowing a car in front of me is slowing down, so I'm going to reduce my speed in the case of the adaptive cruise control scenario. So it really is kind of adding another layer of perception that ultimately enables these vehicles to see the environment much like a human would. And that's really where it gets much more advanced.
Yeah, it's interesting that very often, and I know Joe, you and I live in this domain, but there certainly is a difference between that driver assisted approach, or what's evolving in where what's starting to include the connected vehicle technology, where you're simply not allowed to occupy someone else's location via your GPS address. But that's quite a bit different than actually having the LiDAR vision and camera vision and intuiting things moving forward. Connected vehicle technology is here, and it's arguably been deployed on some production vehicles in the U.S. and around the world. But it's a very simple assist technology, and it's not the same. Those two approaches do add to some of the confusion. Let me ask Joe: has the public or even your public agency customers shown hesitation around implementing autonomous vehicle technology today?
I don't think there's a hesitation out there at all. I think it's ensuring that we implement these solutions in areas where they can be successful. The route lends itself to the use of an autonomous platform. It's providing a meaningful mobility service and not just a test of the technology itself. And so we've seen a number of public transit operations and municipalities and our private sector clients in the area of some of these master plan communities that have absolutely embraced the use of these vehicles. And yes, they are still evolving and they're not perfect. And we, advance the technology a little bit every day towards the end goal of ultimately being able to deploy these in a more, mass volume type scenario. But I would say that the key to success, and this is a big piece of what we have focused on, is if you have a route that lends itself to the successful use of these platforms, if you create an operating domain in a geofenced area that's, a more controlled speed type case, as I've described, and you really understand the limitations of the technology and what the technology is going to be doing in the future, people have endorsed this in all levels of mobility and transportation, and I think we're gaining more and more steam, each day, each month, each year as the technology matures.
But intuitively, Joe, in that geofenced or point-to-point path, I intuitively believe and think that the vehicle itself and the back office system has a great amount of knowledge about that domain, that it allows predictive analytics to occur in a way that might not be possible if you have a free-ranging autonomous vehicle that is continually discovering new environments and new anomalies. for me, that drives an awful lot of trust.
Yeah, Jim, I think that's a great point, and I absolutely agree with that 100%. One of the biggest advantages we have in the communities that we serve is, what I like to call the urban intelligence. We know the environment. We know, that a school lets out at a particular time of day, and we might want to reroute, the vehicles on that standard route during certain times of the day where you've got the congestion associated with a school zone and things of that nature. Simple things like vegetation and other ever-changing happenings, construction and road work and things like that happen in these environments along these predefined routes. We find that having that information and enabling us to ultimately adjust accordingly create scenarios where these vehicles are much more reliable and much more successful. So I think that, if I use our term of urban intelligence, is a really critical component of how we advance the adoption of these solutions.
Yeah, Joe, I don't think that point can be understated. I mean, potholes, someone knocks down a stop sign, all those kind of things can, not only be addressed very quickly, but they also add to that embedded intelligence that gets better with every trip the vehicle makes through that domain.
You're exactly right. And, we've got data to really back that up. We've been operating, our longest standing operation has been out for 2.5 years now. We've expanded from a single route in one of the communities that we serve in Lake Nona, Florida, just outside of Orlando, or a component of Orlando. And, we've gone from one route to 6 routes that have evolved over the course of the last 2.5 years. And you can see the performance of the vehicles, which we measure anytime it has to disengage, anytime we have an incident that the vehicle can't respond to 100% on its own. We've gone from operating in the mid 50 percentiles to in the mid 90s as far as the reliability of these vehicles operating in pure autonomous mode. And that's an example of what you've described here, which is that incorporation of that intelligence and data from the routes that you service to be a piece of the whole operational model.
I imagine taking images on every path could lead to some incredible sets of data. Like how often do you see a certain logo from a sneaker company on a street corner, or or things like that even?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of commercial applications like that. I agree with you. And also just add, Jim, you think about, interestingly enough, I just got a little note in my mailbox here at home about the utility company trimming some trees because they're approaching the power lines. Well, look at all the public works cases you've got out there, whether it's identifying, erosion on a roadway, or whether it's identifying things like, something growing into a power line, safety cases where these vehicles can operate, at night and taking videos of the various, routes after hours where you may not be moving passengers, but you're collecting this data and creating a more secure area. There's endless.
You're absolutely right. I mean, road design, today includes the concept of a clear zone, where if you get into an accident, or that if you go off the road, there is some spot where you can just ride off into the grass. Your vehicles going around taking pictures are now a clear zone auditing mechanism.
Absolutely.
All right, so Joe, let's move into the larger smart city domain. From a smart city perspective, how are you seeing autonomous mobility being adopted by not only municipalities, but any other public agencies that you're working with?
Yeah, so another big advantage I think we all understand the benefits and the value of smart and connected infrastructure inside vehicles, outside vehicles. That has tremendous advantages, not the least of which is obviously improving safety on our roadways, as we've talked about. I think what's unique about our opportunity, and we're doing this on a major project in Peachtree Corners, Georgia, which is just outside of Atlanta, very progressive city in the testing and proving out of the smart city advantages. And in the routes that we are able to service, if you think about this, smart infrastructure isn't just going to appear at every intersection tomorrow. It's going to evolve, and certain areas are going to embrace it sooner than others. And obviously, it takes a good bit of time to upgrade all the infrastructure out there, across all the various environments in our country. But where you've got a very specific corridor that you want to service with these autonomous vehicles, we have the chance to kind of build out that smart infrastructure early and in a very targeted fashion to service a route or an area or a geography. And so we're seeing, more and more opportunities where, as part of a deployment, we're going to do, a parallel effort on the smart city arena or technology, if you will, to be incorporated into the mobility side of what we do.
Joe, let's drive a little bit deeper into that. What infrastructure are we speaking about here? Is it perhaps an LED streetlight conversion where some sensors are embedded in the streetlights for better positioning of your vehicles? Is it connected traffic signals? Is it 5G? What?
Yeah. And the answer is yes, in different areas. But in the example of what we're doing in Lake Nona and in Peachtree Corners, we've developed some really strong use cases for 5G implementation. So utilizing the 5G kind of secure connection to interface directly with traffic signals, to interface directly with crosswalks, to use technologies that illuminate crosswalks at night and things of that nature as pedestrians enter a crosswalk. The ultimate testing of some of these camera technologies lends itself incredibly well to the 5G bandpass that obviously results from those environments. And we've got both with T-Mobile in Peachtree Corners and with Verizon in Lake Nona have partnered with these carriers to begin to connect all of those technologies to improve safety, but also really advance the operational capabilities of these autonomous vehicles.
That's a great point. From my transportation background, I'll tell you that the somewhat of the magic of 5G is its low latency and that determinism. Because eventually, in the near future, that connected vehicle technology will be in pedestrians' phones, and the concept is if you have 5G locally, you will get a few millisecond response of a car is perhaps converging on you, even if you're jaywalking, so that all of that will be connected.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Jim. And, another kind of interesting scenario is fast forward to attendantless autonomous vehicles. We're still going to have the need, in our opinion and in our business thesis, to interface with those vehicles remotely. There is, no time in the near future are autonomous vehicles going to be able to understand every situation they come upon. As I mentioned, we're reducing those edge cases more and more by operating in these common, consistent, predictable environments. But if, something comes about and there's a flag person waving, vehicles around an accident or a pothole or whatever it might be, That's a great example of where, an autonomous platform is probably going to need at some point for a remote connection to say it's okay to make that maneuver, it's okay to take that action. There's going to be that level of remote oversight for safety purposes and operational purposes. And you talk about needing low latency environments, the ability to look down a corridor and understand that a vehicle's not coming and it's safe to maneuver around this obstacle, is a great example of where we've got to have low latency to be able to perform maneuvers like that.
Yeah, well, on that same thought, Joe, very often many autonomous vehicles rely on GPS for locating their vehicles, and that does not often work terribly well in urban canyons. So what's your perspective and Beep's perspective on the need for smart infrastructure to help, realize, safe level 4 and 5 autonomous operations in particularly urban dense environments?
Yeah, so localization of these vehicles is a critical component of, how we operate in our environments today. We utilize dedicated GNSS bases in all of our areas. So to your point, there are scenarios where you can't get the most ideal connectivity. And that's where you've got to, have a level of redundancy built into the autonomous drive systems themselves, to where you think about, if we map a route, we create a three-dimensional map of every route that we service. The vehicle also knows that it is in this exact place if it can see this fire hydrant, this curb, this intersection. So the vehicles have the ability to operate with the intelligence of the ADS system, and frankly, some of the camera technologies fused with the LiDAR technologies in those examples. So it is a combination of, smart infrastructure, some more reliable and dedicated connections like the GNSS example, and then obviously the use of the LTE and other networks. Kind of all of that combined is how you ensure reliable operations.
Okay. Well, Joe, you mentioned Peachtree Corners. Are there other aspects of that project that you'd like to discuss?
Yeah, I think what's exciting about Peachtree Corners is working very closely with the city to advance the testing of these vehicles along their main corridor there in the downtown arena. The next phase of this is, how do we now really interoperate in connecting the residents to a lot of the central retail and restaurant type districts in the city. So, there's a roadmap over a multi-year horizon where we're proving these technologies out. Yes, moving people, but moving people not by crossing a major intersection and going out into a residential area, and longer routes, more sustained routes to connect people that will enable them to leave their cars at home, basically. And so I think what certainly tip my hat to the team at Peachtree Corners is they're really looking at this as not some test to declare they've proven out, X, Y, and Z. It's really more, how do they evolve the use of these vehicles to provide more and more access to the goods and services in that city? And I think that's really where it gets exciting.
Right. Joe, you, on a slightly different subject, you recently shared a funding announcement, and congratulations about that. How will this impact Beep in the coming months and years, and how does it affect your role, Beep's role in the advancement of autonomous vehicles?
Yeah, and thank you for those kind comments. And it is an exciting time for our company, not only welcoming key investors, partners, but also really helping invest in the next generation of these platforms. As part of our future, we recently also announced an important partnership with Intel and their Mobileye subsidiary, a German tier one automotive supplier in Benteler that's going to be building a vehicle for us, combined with the Mobileye ADS platform to bring the first industrial grade vehicle to market in this form factor, meaning these multi-passenger shuttles that are designed for the types of use cases that we've been discussing here today. And so our R&D efforts, are really designed to plug the gap between, what a vehicle supplier does and what an ADS supplier does, and what we ultimately do around ensuring the quality service delivery. And I think, probably one of the most forward-leaning efforts that we have underway is building out that remote command and control environment that will be able to, prioritize the types of scenarios where we may have to interface with these vehicles or engage these vehicles due to a safety incident or a health incident or whatever might occur out there. That's going to be the next layer of adoption, is going to be how do people feel comfortable getting on a non-attended vehicle, in the evening. And it's not just about having a great vehicle and a really important, advanced autonomous drive system that operates that vehicle effectively. It's what is that service layer that ultimately ensures both, safety and performance. And that's what Beep is focused on.
Joe, I was particularly excited by that Intel, Mobileye, and Benteler and Beep joint initiative. To me, it's really three legs of a stool. You have a leading hardware vendor, Benteler, Intel, Mobileye, software vendor, and really the wrapping that pulls it all together really is the operations and maintenance partner, which is Beep. I was interested in a few moments ago, you talked about an industrial grade hardware platform. Can you talk about how this upcoming vehicle in your project differs from current shuttles, multi-passenger small shuttles that are out there on the market today?
Yeah, a purpose-built today the various flavors of purpose-built autonomous shuttles are, manufactured in very low volumes, and they're not manufactured by the tier one suppliers that print out, many thousands and hundreds of thousands of vehicles in the example of, what Benteler does in they're supplying to the automotive industry. One, it's a question of scale. It's a question of affordability. Obviously, in higher volumes, you're able to bring to market a vehicle that's going to be much more cost effective. And then lastly, and certainly not least, is the importance of, building a federal motor vehicle safety standard accredited platform. So the vehicle that has been through all the necessary testing and performance to, ensure that it can be successfully adopted by public transit. And you and I both know, and that's probably a much bigger discussion, there's certain federal motor vehicle safety standards that don't apply to a purpose-built autonomous vehicle, and that's a piece of what is being evolved at the Department of Transportation in rules making changes and exemptions and other things that they allow for to be able to ultimately deploy these vehicles.
To date, many of the autonomous vehicle proof of concepts and pilots have been small. My intuition is that this joint initiative is targeting some larger, more production type applications. What market is this Intel, Mobileye, Benteler, Beep collaboration targeting?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. The vehicles, as they've been tested and proven out, have been in smaller use cases, 2, 4, 6, 8 type shuttles on very specific routes. If you look at the biggest need that we've got in our country right now for extending mobility, it is in these microtransit scenarios that we've been talking about. How do I can easily get to a downtown area on mass transit. How do I then access arterial routes across those downtown areas? So, to us, this isn't replacing bus services. This is really extending mobility to, reduce road congestion, but provide access to anybody and everybody, in these communities. The Jacksonville Transportation Authority, a little bit north of us, is one of the most exciting projects going on globally that is not only smart city and autonomous platform related, but also really represents what we think is going to be the future of transportation, the use of these types of vehicles. And, that's going to be a project that ultimately is 50 or 60 vehicles connecting the various areas of downtown Jacksonville. Their CEO, Nat Ford, and Vice President of Automation, Bernard Schmidt, are, two, I think, real industry thought leaders as it relates to what the future holds. And, this project that they'll be deploying in the next couple of years, I think represents, what the future will be, which is much larger uses of these types of vehicles.
Well, that's fascinating. Joe, what deep learnings have you really experienced from deploying real world service that really sheds a light on practical deployment of autonomous services around the country or even around the world, in terms of real value and not just these proof of concepts?
Yeah, I hit on this a little bit, Jim, but it's certainly worth reinforcing. I mean, one is the technology is still maturing. It's not perfect yet. It is absolutely ready to be implemented in real life scenarios, but more controlled environments like I've described, and known environments, and with the proper tools in place to ensure that you're monitoring these vehicles, maintaining these vehicles, and ensuring you're developing the intelligence around these environments to continually improve their operations. Rider adoption is absolutely critical. You want to make certain that, these vehicles aren't viewed as a novelty. Let's ride it one time, say I rode the autonomous vehicle. And you do that by really delivering meaningful use cases. I've got a scenario where I'm moving people from a hotel over to a medical center where they stay and ultimately, visit family and or seek out services at the VA medical center or at an Amours Children's Hospital. So it's, really making sure that you're not only putting them in a successful scenario from an operating domain perspective, but as importantly, from a use case perspective. And then the other thing I'd say that's, really so critical to this for all of us is, this industry needs to be much more transparent than most. And what I mean by that is, we all learn from every scenario we face on the roadways. We all share a common goal of what we're trying to do to improve the use of these technologies to create safer mobility alternatives. But we only do that by taking our learnings and sharing them with others. And I think that's where NHTSA and the U.S. Department of Transportation have played such an important role with their test program, is working together, with the private sector and with industry to ensure that we are sharing much data as we can to help advance the use of these technologies for all groups out there trying to leverage them.
Wow. Thanks, Joe. We're nearing the end of our podcast time today, Joe. So are there any last comments you'd like to voice for our audience?
No, I think we've covered a lot of ground, Jim. I appreciate all the good work you're doing out there, and it's really exciting to be able to share some of what we've learned, some of the history, and some of the future that is in front of us. So appreciate the opportunity.
That's great. Before we go, Joe, if some of our listeners would like to reach out and speak with Beep or yourself, can you provide some contact information?
Yeah, absolutely. The easiest way to get a hold of us is to go to our website. We've got a contact button on the site there, which is ridebeep, ridebeep.com. So look forward to hearing from you.
Well, again, Joe, it's been a thrill and a pleasure to have you here on the Smart City podcast today. We look forward to having you or perhaps some of your ecosystem partners on again in the near future. So have a great day, Joe. Thank you.
And you too, Jim.
Broadcasting from Boston, Massachusetts, the Smart Cities podcast is the only podcast dedicated to all things smart cities. The podcast is the creation of ARC Advisory Group's Smart City practice. ARC advises leading companies, municipalities, and governments on technology trends and market dynamics that affect their business and quality of life in their cities. To engage further, please like and share our podcast or reach out directly on Twitter at Smart City Viewpoints or on our website at www.arcweb.com/industries/smart-cities.